cut your microphones on. 6 o'clock, and I'd like to call this meeting of Lancaster County Council to order tonight here on December the 14th, 2020, as we wrap up another year, and glad to see y'all here. I'd like to welcome our guest, and as you see, Mr. Honeycutt is under the weather tonight, will not be with us, so keep him and his family in your prayers in our holiday season. And with that, would you please rise and join Councilmember Terry Graham as he leads us in our Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the invocation.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's pray. We give thanks for this day and this opportunity for this council to meet. We pray for Larry Honeycutt and his wife, Jan. We pray for all the people that have COVID or whose lives have been affected by this virus. We pray that this virus be over soon. We ask that you be with us as we do the business of this great county. We ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Let's move on down to the approval of our agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
A motion from Ms. McGriff. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Graham. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, if I would like to request an amendment to remove the three executive session items for economic development. 2 will be covered on the 30th, 1 will be covered in January.
All right, do I have somebody make that motion?
So moved. Second.
Motion from Ms. McGriff to remove the three economic development projects, and have a second from Mr. Mosteller. All in favor, raise your right hand. Any other amendments? Hearing none, we're ready to vote on our agenda as approved. All in favor, raise your right hand. Let's move our special presentations. You're going to take care of
Yes, sir.
Senator Sheehan. First of all, we have recognition of Vincent Sheehan by our County Administrator, Steve Willis.
Mr. Chairman, members of council, Vincent Shaheen could not be with us tonight. He had a board meeting for a hospital he serves as attorney for and had to be there for that. So he sent his regrets. But as we have recognized Senator Greg Gregory and Representative Mandy Powers-Norrell, we do have a proclamation declaring today Senator Vincent Shaheen Day in recognition of his service since 2004 as the senator for District 27, which encompassed the southern part of Lancaster County, and we certainly want to thank him for his service.
All right, thank you. Let's move on down to our audit presentation of our comprehensive annual financial report for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2020 for Lancaster County, presented by Grant Davis, CPA, Director for Malden and Jenkins and Subsidies, LLC. Mr. Davis.
Y'all hear me okay? Well, I appreciate y'all having me here this evening to go through the CAFR for fiscal year 20. And I've got some highlights here that I've taken from the document. The whole thing's about 130 pages, so I think I've said this for the past couple of years, but if you read one section of the document, I'd recommend you read what's called the Management's Discussion and Analysis, or the MD&A. It's on pages 4 to 14. It provides some historical analysis in what happened in fiscal year 19 versus what happened in fiscal year 20, and then a brief look forward into the year we're in now, fiscal year 21. But again, just a few highlights from the document, and if at any time you all have any questions, just feel free to interrupt me. But the first page I wanted to highlight is the first page that has a number on the bottom of it. It's a few pages into the document, but it's actually page number 1, and it's our independent auditor's report. It's got our letterhead on the top. We've issued an unmodified opinion on the county's financial statements, doesn't sound great. It's a sort of an unglamorous terminology, but it's the best such results you can get in a financial statement audit. Beyond that, just to look at some of the numbers, beginning on page 15, you'll see what's called the statement of net position. This is essentially just a balance sheet, and a few highlights here from that. You'll see total assets of the county at about $216 million. The largest portion of that total is capital assets at about a little over $105 million at the end of June 2020. Other couple significant portions, cash on hand at the end of June 2020, about $25.5 million. That represents about 12% of that total assets number. And then investments, $71.2 million, and again, about 33% of your total assets. So a significant portion of that total assets is $216, cash and investments at right around $100 million, and then a little north of $100 million capital assets there. Just some further highlights here. Total liabilities on that same statement, a little over $110 million, and that's comprised of the largest single liability on your balance sheet is the net pension liability that's administered by PEBA, right at about $51.5 million, and that represents about 47% of those total liabilities figures. Other long-term liabilities in the forms of GO bond debt, capital leases, landfill liabilities, so forth and so on, about $38 million, and that includes the current portion or that portion that's due within 1 year of June 30th, 2020, and a long-term portion. So again, indebtedness of about $38 million, and then current liabilities, things like accounts payable, accrued salaries, things of that nature, about $16.5 million of the liability. So all that gets us to the very bottom part of that statement, net position or equity at the end of June 2020, about $115 million. The most significant element of that net position amount is the investment in capital assets, right at about $80.5 million, and that's your total capital assets net of accumulated depreciation minus any outstanding debt that was used to acquire those capital assets. So that's why you'll see a difference between that number and the amount that I mentioned in the higher up in the balance sheet there earlier. Restricted net position, which is for things like capital projects, debt service, other things like that, about $33 million, and then unrestricted, a positive $1.2 million, and in the past that's been a deficit number or a negative number. So it's great to see, that for the first time, the majority of governments began reporting deficit positions in their unrestricted net position after about 2015, when we implemented the pension standard and we had to quantify that great big pension liability. So most places were carrying a big negative deficit unrestricted net position. So it's good that over the last 5 years, you've been able to recover essentially that entire amount of that net pension liability and go from a deficit number to a positive number. So good, obviously good news to report there. The following statement on page 16 is sort of an odd layout, but it's called the Statement of Activities. It's the income statement for the county on a full accrual basis of accounting, and the reason it's laid out the way it is to report the cost of functional areas for things like general government, public safety, the charges that are derived specifically from those programs or services, and then at the very bottom you can see the savior of those programs being property taxes, franchise fees, things of that nature to balance the year. And you'll notice an increase in your net position or equity of about $18 million from 2019 to 2020, and that is a large number. And just to reconcile that a little bit and give you some flavor on where that's coming from, you all had capital assets, net capital asset additions, and when I say net, I mean you spent money to purchase capital assets, which is then offset by depreciation, or partially offset by depreciation on those assets of about $10 million. So a net investment in the infrastructure of the county of about $10 million. And then you all paid down that long-term indebtedness that we mentioned earlier to the tune of about $10 million. So you're shrinking your liabilities, you're increasing your long-term assets there. So kind of a rough reconciliation there of that large increase in your net position, about $18 million. So again, a significant portion of that investing in yourself and paying down the debt associated with that. Just moving beyond that to page 17, this is the balance sheet for the governmental type funds, and the primary operating fund of any government is the general fund, and just a few highlights here. General fund has assets of about almost $92 million. Of that 92, again rounding, about 81.5 represents cash and investments, and that may seem like a large number, but as we get down and sort of explain where some of that's going. There's also various accounts receivable from property taxes, other intergovernmental grants, other receivables like that of about $10 million, and then we get to the liability section of the general fund. You can see total liabilities of about $42.7 million. A significant portion of that $35 million is what is owed to other funds of the county. So the general fund is acting sort of like a central depository for cash for all the other funds, and it owes monies to those other funds, which is reflected as a receivable on the other funds and a payable in the general fund. So nothing alarming about that large number associated with those internal balances. All this leads us to fund balance in the general fund of about $43.8 million. Of that 43.8, 31 is what we call unassigned. So it's not restricted, it's not committed or assigned to any function or program. It's essentially free to be spent at the county's discretion. Just a little flavor on that amount there. When you look at total fund balance of about $42.7 million as a percentage of your expenditures in the general fund this past year, this fiscal year 20, you're sitting at about 76% of your expenditures there in fund balance, which is a great place to be, and that's total fund balance. And we look at the unassigned fund balance, about 54% of your total expenditures for fiscal year 20 in unassigned fund balance. So you've got essentially half a year of operations sitting there at June 30th, probably the leanest date on your calendar in terms of collecting receipts from property taxes and things like that to get you through from June, especially till December, January, when property taxes start coming in. So again, in light of the pandemic, that is a great place to be. Of course, the county is not necessarily heavily reliant on accommodations taxes or tourism or things like that. So we wouldn't expect to see a huge decline from things that are derived from that nature like you would at other communities, maybe on the coast. But again, to have gone through the summer, the middle of the summer where we are, and to see that you've got half a year of fund balance on hand is a great place to be. And you need that kind of funding or financing, that reserve, to get you through these strange times like we're in now. Starting to see some communities that have to issue tax anticipation notes and things like that have been hard hit, and you all are nowhere near being in that position, which is a great place to be. So again, about 6 months on hand of fund balance at the end of June 2020. Just a couple more highlights from the statements here. Page 19 is the income statement to the general fund, or the governmental type funds, and again, just going to highlight the general fund for the most part. Total revenues of the general fund about $63 million. 41.4 of that is property taxes, or about 65% of the general fund's revenues are property tax related. General fund expenditures of almost $58 million. Overall, general fund reports an increase in its fund balance or equity position of about $4.3 million from 2019 to 2020. And this is going to require you to flip to the back a little bit, but pages 69 and 70 show the general fund's budgetary comparison, where we go the original as adopted, final as amended, and then actual numbers and the comparison thereof. Revenues were budgeted about $67.9 million. We recognized about $66.4 million, so a revenue shortfall of about $4.5 million. Expenditures were budgeted about $66.7 million. We recognized about $57.9 million, so a positive variance associated with expenditures of about $8.8 million. So all this, the general fund reports to the good, so to speak, variance of actual activities versus budget of about $4.3 million. So very positive results for the general fund. Again, even though there was a revenue shortfall, you more than made up for it with less expenditures. So again, just a few highlights from the statements there. Last few things I have, pages 25 through 68 are all the footnotes associated with these financial statements. I'm not going to go through them unless you all have any specific questions about them. Just beyond that, pages 69 through 109 are what we call supplementary information. Some of that is required by governmental accounting standards. Some of that is required by state law. Some of that is required as a part of submitting your financial statements to the Government Finance Officers Association to be party to the award program that you all have participated in for a number of years now. But that's all, again, pages 69 to 102. The statistical section that shows 10 years of data, financial data, operating data, demographic data, is found on pages 103 through 125. And then the last few things I'll mention here, pages 126 and 127 are the second of 3 reports we've issued in these financial statements. Again, the first one was on page number 1. That was our unmodified opinion on the financial statements as a whole. This second of the 3 reports on 126 and 127 is what we call our yellow book report. It's the report on government in accordance with government auditing standards, and that is to say that we designed and conducted our audit in accord with government auditing standards, which requires that we test for things like controls and compliance, and as a part of that, we noted no instances of non-compliance or internal control deficiencies to report to you all. So again, we don't provide an opinion here, but just say we didn't notice anything wrong as a part of our audit in accordance with government auditing standards. And then the third of the 3 reports is found on pages 128 and 129. You all had over $750,000 in federal expenditures, so monies that originated with the federal government that was then spent by the county. Some of that comes directly from the federal government, some of that comes through the state. Anyway, that triggers what's a compliance audit. We call it a single audit of federal awards, and that report does provide an opinion. We audited 2 major programs of the county, the Battlefield Land Acquisition Program and the SAFER program, which has to do with firefighters. We found no issues of noncompliance or internal control deficiencies associated with either of those 2 federal programs. So that's, again, another clean report. And then all of this is summarized on page 133, which is called the Schedule of Findings and Question Costs. We had no findings. We had an unmodified report on the financial statements, no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in internal controls, no noncompliance. Again, just an overall good report from a compliance standpoint, and then, as I mentioned, with the financial highlights, an account or a financial standpoint, everything looks very sound, especially in light of the pandemic. And I will just say, Veronica and her team do a great job. This was a strange year from conducting an audit. Just to be honest, we've got sort of a hybrid approach where we're not on site as much as we have been in years past with 3-4 people for 2 weeks, but we did come on site to some extent, did a lot of remote work, and happy to say that went very well. And again, they do a great job. So any questions? I know that was probably information overload.
This might be a question. Why are revenues down 4%, and how did we reduce the cost expenditures? And maybe this has been discussed in the admin committee, but can you just give us a brief comment on that?
So I didn't quite hear your question. What was
The question was, the revenues were down 4%, but also the costs, the expenditures were also down. Just, I don't...
The revenues were down 4% because we appropriated a number of projects with fund balance. So that's why, that just shows that you use fund balance, which is the one-time items. The reason that the expenditures were down was due to the COVID. In March, we decided to curtail all expenditures because we didn't know how the economy and everything would affect COVID. So we kind of curtailed the expenditures. And then there were a number of projects because some departments didn't get a chance to complete their projects. We carried forward to this current year.
So we expect revenue expenditures to go up in the current year?
We hope with that we can get all the projects done. We're pretty much on task.
Any other questions? Well, we thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
real quickly before Grant sits down, just would note, this is the 21st consecutive CAFR. Well, last year's was the 21st consecutive CAFR, which is recognized in the current audit. 21 in a row. Outstanding work by the financial team, as Grant mentioned. This report tonight will be 22 sometime next year.
And
That's great.
Veronica and Kimberly.
We hope that it will be 22.
We appreciate.
It'll be 22.
What y'all do.
I would like to take this time to thank staff, publicly thank staff. It was a different year. We had to provide them a whole lot of information. I don't know, about a couple of hundred documents loaded onto a portal.
Absolutely.
And so staff really had to take the time to accumulate the documentation, scan it, and make sure that it was loaded on the portal for them. So a lot of work on staff's part, so I appreciate that.
All right. Thank y'all again. All right, we move down to our pending projects update for new construction and major renovation projects. Ms. Kathy McDaniel and Mr. Kelvin Alexander.
Just while Kathy and Kelvin come up, I did want to let council know that the tracker that's at the back, I wasn't able to get that updated before the meeting. The graphic that shows the schedule, there was a little technical difficulty there on the transition from Allison to and I could not get it done in time for the meeting agenda deadline. So that will be back in there updated for you at the next meeting. There will be some changes on the library schedule, I'm sure, because we're still working out the IT schedule on that. I think it currently says December 15th to January 15th would kind of be the completion timeframe, and we're not there. And then the other thing I wanted to mention was I did remove the animal shelter and EMS 4 and 9 because those are largely complete and have opened. So I'll turn it over to you.
Well, she addressed one thing I was going to talk about, with the IT issues. They have contracted with Founders for the setup because we don't have the staff to do the computers and hardware and software setup. And they hope to have firm install dates from Founders around early January. The hardware and all of the networking equipment has been ordered. It's coming in. Some of it slowly, but it's starting to come in. Substantial completion for all 3 locations. Now, this is a construction substantial completion. This is not opening day. Is, for the large part, the same as it has been. Dale Webb, we finally got the roof panels in that I believe I told you about a couple weeks ago, but they can't get anybody to install them. Their installer is having issues with COVID with staff, so they're in the process. I actually talked to the contractor walking up the stairs. They're trying to contact another roofing company to come in and finish installing the roof panels. The punch list for Dale Webb was completed last Wednesday, and there weren't any major issues. They're working on that list now. Is mostly just, a stain on the carpet here or a piece of missing laminate here and, just minor issues. Kershaw's walkthrough was the 2nd, which was Wednesday before last. It went well. We've got all the shelving, furniture, signage installed. There is a quality issue with the end caps on the shelving, and that may have to be replaced. We're working with the shelving company on that right now. They're actually supposed to come in the morning to look at it. We have a little hang up in Kershaw with Segra, which is a fiber company, much like Comporium. And Scott could explain this better, but instead of Comporium owning the line out there, Segra owns it. So we contact Segra. Segra contacts Comporium, they come out and put the line in. Well, Segra their timelines are a little bit further out than Comporium, and we haven't got a firm date on install at Kershaw yet for networking the actual cable itself. The parking lot was scheduled to start to be installed last week. Weather held that up. It was scheduled to be today. Hopefully, only one day will be held up again. They said that they're looking at it taking a week for them to mill it up and then put it back in. But they hopefully can get started tomorrow. Lancaster, Maine is going well. We still have the moisture mitigation issues. We're looking at a rough estimate, $45,000 to $50,000 to get that taken care of. But we're still waiting on a firm estimate from the contractor to come in and let us know where we're at with that.
Kathy, can you elaborate on that? What's causing the moisture problem?
The building was built in the 70s, much like Kershaw. You know, we had to do the same thing at Kershaw. They didn't put any plastic underneath no kind of moisture control whatsoever under the slabs. So it's basically groundwater. And the building was opened up, and it just, I guess when you open a building up like that, it just invites it all in. But that's why they recommend that if you have issues like that on a building that has been opened up, that you run HVAC for about 2 weeks, let the building acclimatize to the HVAC system, and we've done that, and it no different. So it's just water under the building.
So who's gonna pay for the $40,000 or $50,000? Is that the contractor's fault or whose fault?
No, that's not. That is what we call an existing condition. It's Lancaster County's building, so Lancaster County has to pay for it.
Well, it's a private enterprise take a different approach, I believe.
Did we add some contingency in that budget too?
That is gonna be coming from the contingency.
Okay.
But yeah, it's basically, I mean, it's one of those things that you don't know. And we basically knew that we were gonna encounter this because of the age of the building. We're not having to mitigate any moisture in the addition because they put plastic under the foundation. It's just in the older part. So we basically knew going into it that we were gonna run into this problem. We just didn't know how bad it was gonna be. But most flooring companies won't warranty their floor unless the moisture content is less than, most of them are like 94 to 97%.
Do we have an opening date for Del Webb?
No, sir. We're still waiting
Told me
on,
January, the last meeting.
well, that was substantial completion. We're waiting on the network equipment for Lancaster, and it's coming in. It's coming in slower than we thought it would because of COVID. But, I mean, just about everywhere we've turned during COVID, we've hit supply issues or staffing issues because the whole crew gets COVID at one time. But the stuff is starting to come in. Once we get a firm date from Founders, we can give you an opening date. But
Well,
until
my-
then, I'm just not comfortable sticking
Yeah,
my
it's
neck
my
out.
constituents that wanna know, not just me.
Oh, I know. I want to know too.
Well, thank you.
Any more questions?
Thank you, Ms. McDaniel.
Good evening, council. EMS HQ, this project pretty much, we've already had the bids sent out, already have a contract set for the paving portion of the project. The general contractor portion, we're still reviewing things with the GC. He has some questions on some of the details in the contract, so hopefully we can get that ironed out this week and get those contracts signed and get him started. The IT portion of the project, we broke the project down in 3 parts: paving, the general contractor portion, and then the IT. So we sent out those the advertisements that went out today. So that portion should be we should be ready to get bids in, around the mid January, and that won't affect any of the start of the general contractor portion, so that shouldn't hold up any of the schedule. So that's pretty much where we are with EMS HQ. The Springs Park portion, went to the site last week. All of the silk fence post BMPs have already been removed, so that this project is pretty much ready for a grand opening date. Just little small miscellaneous items, just a few areas that has some settlement where has some water holding, but none of those items will hold up the grand opening. So pretty much whenever administration staff is ready to do the grand opening, that one will be ready to open. The Heat Springs soccer fields, both the Indian Land and the Heat Springs, we have received the approval for the architectural plans for the building itself. The civil portion, we still have some comments that we are going to be ironing out hopefully at this week's TRC meeting with the staff there. So we have a time slot scheduled. So we'll be coming in and with the architect and reviewing the questions or concerns for the IT, and the TRC staff. Indian Land Recreation Edition, those drawings are still ongoing. We met last week with the IT staff to locate the data and cameras throughout the building. So they're still working on, getting those drawings finalized, and we anticipate those to be complete mid-January, as I stated in the report. DSS building, we're still in the design phase. I've been meeting pretty consistently with the DSS staff and the architect. So they're hoping to have those drawings completed by the end of December. So we'll be ready to get those over to procurement and send those out to bid. That's pretty much most of our projects right now are in the design phase. We have any questions or anything?
A little bit more about EMS's design problems, the headquarters. Did we not contract with a designer to do that?
No, we don't have any problems with the design problems with EMS headquarters. The architect, not the architect, the general contractor is looking at the details of the contracts, and he has some questions about some of the language that our lawyer we hired put into some of the contracts. So he's kind of going back to his legal team, and I'm having to review their requests with our lawyer to make sure that it's something that we can do.
Lawyer you're using?
Well, John DeBose and Ned Nicholson, I send it usually to Ned, and a lot of times I'll copy John on it just to make sure he's in the loop.
I got a question, Mr. Chair. Wouldn't the contractor ask these questions, got all this done before the bid process and all that? Well, I mean, I don't understand him coming in now and.
Well, yes, we did. We did have a contract that was included in the bid advertisement, but there are just a few items that needed to be ironed out. So there's no real major changes. The cost is still going to be the same. It's just some of the questions about some of the language, but nothing I don't think is major. It's just I want to make sure that we're not doing anything to compromise, our contract.
I just got a concern that we're gonna delaying these projects on little things like this. It's just gonna make our cost on all of our projects continue to rise, and they're gonna be coming back needing more money, and
Well,
I thought we was set to go with the bid and the contractor ready to go. I was hoping they would start doing something, but.
Yes, sir, definitely. I've been pushing them, go ahead and get these final requests out the way, but his price is not gonna change. This is more or less costing him more money.
Yeah, but while he do the same things that he said he would do in the contract, his price may not change, but he might take some stuff out of the contract that he promised to do.
No, sir, that won't be the
When
case.
you went out to bid, did you put a sample contract with the bid package?
Yes, sir.
Now you want to argue about the contract?
That's what I don't understand.
Yeah, well, it's just some minor items, but, I mean,
Well, I've seen some emails go back and forth, and this, I remember the low voltage, some of the IT wiring was a concern, so it was not anything major, not structural or anything like that.
well, his portion is really just some of the language. Like I said, hopefully we get the items iron out this week. I just wanted to, it's really no
Bill, as
price.
I have said, we need a good construction lawyer, and this points more to that fact. This is number 2 as far as I'm concerned. And this is not acceptable.
And like I said, this was one, it's an older contract, but like I said, the message was received on the other one, and Attorney and I are working on that.
Well, but even other projects, I mean, the message was for the detention center, but it should be for other projects until we can get more confidence.
Yes, sir.
To move back to where we've been.
Yes, sir.
When did the contractor raise these concerns?
Pretty much right after, when we sent the contracts out to be signed, I just sent it out, just a quick review, make sure there's nothing that because sometimes there are little mistakes here and there. Just, okay, this is the contract. Review, let me know if you have any questions or comments. And so he sent a couple little items to me, and so we made the adjustments, sent them to Ned. It's probably been a couple of weeks of, kind of back and forth.
Did we substantially change anything from what was in the bid documents
Did we change anything in the?
when you sent the contract to him?
The only thing that was changed was more of there was a penalty for a late fees, if the project was behind schedule, and that was one of the items that, like I said, when we sent this contract out, we were still developing our contract. We didn't have an exact contract at that time. So some of those items, when we did our walkthrough, they were asking questions, will this be included, in the project? And so it was more of items that went out in the addendum, and so we had to make the adjustments in the contract once the addendum went out, based on all the questions all the contractors asked questions throughout the process. And so we put them all together, send out an addendum to the whole group, so when they send their bids back, everything should be accounted for.
Did he not question it when he sent his bid in as far as what was in the addendum?
What do you mean?
You said
We said,
there were
like,
questions,
it was
you had an
for
addendum
questions
issued.
on the details of the actual scope. It was more details of the scope of the work. And then the contract itself, in terms of, that is really outside of the scope. It was more of just some of the legal terms.
So how long has this been going on?
It's been, 2, 3 weeks.
All right. I assume that this is in high gear now? That this is going to be taken care of quickly?
Yes, sir.
This all sounds a little messy to me.
Any other questions?
Any more comments? Questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Alexander. All right, let's move down to item number 7. Now we go to our citizens' comments. I'm about to forget. Please bear in mind, this is not a period of dialogue with council or a question and answer period. This is your opportunity to address council with your concerns. I ask that you address your remarks to council as a body and not to any individual council member. Please speak into the microphone, state your name and address for the record, and you will have up to 3 minutes to address council. Your time will not start until you have provided your name and address. First up, we have Mr. Mick Mulvaney.
Thanks, y'all. Mick Mulvaney, 550 Ralph Hood Road in Indiana. I was down this week to say hey to Sherry and Steve for Christmas, and Steve mentioned y'all had a hearing tonight on a residential improvement district which I think is the first time the county's ever done that, and it may be the first time the state has ever done that. And of course, Steve, being Steve, remembered that I was actually the person who wrote that legislation back in 2008. So he asked me to come down and tell a little bit about why we did what we did to see if it was appropriate for what y'all are doing right now, which you remember when we developed the old St. Catherine, we got the approval from county years ago on St. Catherine. One of the limitations on what we did there was that we could only put the improvements inside the boundaries of that subdivision. So the baseball fields, the basketball fields, the soccer fields that you see there had to be located inside the boundaries of that development. And one of the things we tried to do in this legislation, in fact, the big thing we tried to do in this legislation is allow those monies that were raised from those big subdivisions to be used outside the bounds. So if you wanted to build a fire station outside of the boundary, or a school outside the boundary, or you wanted to extend your sewer or your water lines outside the boundary, you could do it, because at that time, prior to the Residential Improvement District Act, you did not have the ability to do that. Also, if you had really, really big things like a school, a high school, that was too expensive for one development to sort of pay for, you could pool them. So you could pick 5 or 6 future developments and say, look, we'll approve this, but the additional taxes from the tax increment financing would go towards this approved project that everybody knew about in advance, and it was on the table for the public to comment on. So I understand that is it Lennar Pulte? I think it's Lennar is building the big thing up just north of town, and that they want to use this to build a sewer off-site of the property. That is the exact intent of what this was supposed to be. I don't know what else. Steve, you said there's no questions and stuff like that, so I guess I can't take that. But if anybody has any questions about the background, call me. I think everybody here except Mr. Mosteller and Mr. Blackman still have my cell phone number. So call me if you got any questions about it. But thanks very much for having me. Merry Christmas. Any questions?
You going to hang around, or are you going to leave?
I promised my wife I'd be. I haven't been home in 13 years, Steve, so she sort of likes it when I come home for dinner. But at the risk of going out of order, if you all have questions about it, I'd be happy to answer them.
We'll call you.
Yeah, and I saw, by the way, I had 58 seconds left. I saw that Governor Sanford didn't sign the piece of legislation that became law without his signature, which, if you know Mark, probably doesn't surprise anybody. But I do remember when we got this through, it was supported by the entire delegation at the time. I was in the House at the time, and Greg was in the. It was me and Jimmy Neal. And then Greg was in the Senate, and I think we all voted for this. Thanks, y'all. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Mulvaney. Ms. Sarah Phillips.
My name is Sarah Phillips. I live at 2045 Robert H. Kirk Road, Lancaster. Good evening, Mr. Harper, Mr. Blackman, Mr. Carnes, Mr. Graham, Mr. Mosteller, and Ms. McGriff. I would like to thank you for your unwavering support of the new animal shelter. There were a few bumps in the road, but your determination to build the shelter overcame those difficulties. The new shelter is a beautiful addition to the landscape of Lancaster County. To paraphrase Gandhi, the greatness of a county and its moral progress can be judged by the way its animals are treated. They are certainly receiving better treatment at this new shelter. It is a jewel to the county. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips. That concludes our citizens' comments this evening, and we will move down to item number 7, our consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve consent agenda 7A, 7B, 7C.
Second.
Have a motion from Mr. Mosteller, a second from Ms. McGriff. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval of our consent agenda this evening. Let's move down to our non-consent agenda. Item 8A, which is Resolution 1126-R2020 regarding adding properties located in Chesterfield County to the multi-county park agreement. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion for Mr. Carnes. I have a second.
Yeah, I'll second it.
Second for Mr. Graham. Mr. DeBose.
Thank you, members of council. This is more or less a housekeeping resolution. Basically, when Chesterfield adds counties to their multi-county park, Lancaster County passes a resolution incorporating them. They just did the same for Lancaster about the last few meetings that they've had, adding recently added Lancaster County properties into the agreement. So this is essentially just returning the favor and allowing these Chesterfield County properties to be governed by that multi-county park agreement.
Any questions, comments? Thank you, Mr. Bose. Hearing no discussion, I think we're ready to vote. Have a motion for approval. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous, which would be 6 to 0, and 1 absent. Let's move to 8B, Resolution 1127-R2020 regarding authorization of funding for the MIS department. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion from Ms. McGree.
Second.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Blackman. Ms. Belk?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As council, I believe, is aware, this department, which is more commonly referred to as the IT department, we just still have it in our financials as MIS, so that's why it's written that way, just for the audience's knowledge. As I believe y'all are aware, we've had some transitions in that department. We have brought in a consultant to kind of look at our operations. That's part of some of the funding we're looking for. And as part of their evaluation, along with current staff's evaluation, we identified some things that have been deemed sort of critical needs that need to be taken care of sooner rather than later, or else they may impact county operations and our functionality. And so I'm coming to y'all to ask for a not to exceed $465,000. I did include a document that kind of goes into each item in depth, which I'm happy to go through with y'all as well if you need me to. And I'm here for any questions. Scott's also here. I'll do my best to navigate it, but if it gets too technical, I'll throw the, I'll call him up to the podium. Do y'all have any questions for me?
I do.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm sure Alan looks like he's got a question. But anyway, this will be coming from fund balance. It's not already in the budget?
No.
Why did it not come before the administration committee? Because this is talking about money that's not in the budget.
Yes, ma'am. I should have covered that. Because of the nature of some of the items, we were we need to execute this before there was going to be a meeting, so that's why it got put on this agenda. I'm certainly willing to discuss it at the administration committee meeting, but that was honestly the reason why.
Well, I wish, because I think we've said this numerous times, anytime we're talking money and it's not in the budget, it needs to come before the admin committee. I really wish you had email the admin committee to ask whether it should come before the committee or the full council, because we really had an opportunity to talk about this. I know there's so many other things in the budget, because the audit is complete. We've got a fund balance of how many million, and I'm hoping that tomorrow morning meeting that we'll have an opportunity to talk about those things. But this here caught me by surprise. That's all I got to say.
Can any of this for the library be paid out of the bond, the capital projects?
I don't think there's a legal prohibition, but the issue was not library related. It was related to IT. That's why we're proposing to pay it out of this.
I mean, you're talking about $465,000. This is not just a drop in the Now, I don't understand how we could get so far out in left field with the IT department that we have to spend $500,000 tomorrow.
I agree, Mr. Chairman. Number one question I have is where are we at on our fund balance? Are we in that below the 28%, or are we above it? Because we've been being preached to most of this half of the year that we were below fund balance and that we needed to be careful in what we were spending.
So after the conclusion of the audit with what the spending was at the end of last year, as well as what we took in, we're above that. I would say that even though that, just as a caveat to that, even if we were in that, we were around 30% is what I was saying. Even if we were around that, the nature of these, as far as, our consultants have explained and our staff has explained, is it is an emergent need, which would give us, the ability to potentially go below that for the time being. But I do want to say, yes, you are correct. We are above the threshold at the conclusion of our audit, yes.
Does that take into account the projects that we rolled over from last year? Does any of those affect the fund balance?
Yes, they do, but even with where we ended up, we're going to be above. So y'all do have some room. I do have some items that I want to bring to your attention as part of the CIP process in January, but I was planning on covering it then.
Well, I share Mr. Graham's concerns. I mean, my number one question is, why was this not in the budget if we knew we were coming to the end of life on this equipment? I mean, this is about the third time this has happened this year that we've come up, we got a problem. This is coming to the end of fund life, and this stuff is not rocket scientists. I mean, we know on equipment when the end of the life cycle is, and we should already have budgeted this instead of coming up and it being an emergency now.
Mr. Willis, Mr. Willis address.
Mr. Chairman, members of council, I don't want to sit here and say you don't have valid points. I just want to point out this is not a financial issue. When the CIP was presented last year, and I don't want to throw anybody under the bus that's not here, but former director submitted CIP. This was not included. The only thing that was included was regular transition of desktop units. Once we became aware there was an issue, we engaged an outside consultant to come in and take a look at our overall MIS network and system. He brought to our attention we've got some very significant issues in hardware. Most significant are the file share and the exchange servers. Those are one-time items, but they were not in the CIP. I'm not saying, as administrator, it all falls on me. We messed up. I just want to make sure it's not finance. It's not a budgetary issue.
No, it's the process issue, because even if it was not in the budget, and we had said anytime it's going to affect the budget, we've got to do a revision, that it comes before a committee. The committee would have had time to talk about it, discuss it, and make a recommendation to full council. Now we're out here discussing it from the start. When I saw this in the agenda, I said, we should have had this in committee, because this just didn't happen today, right? How long did we know about this? We could have had a call committee meeting, had this done, hammered it out, tried to clean it up as best we could to bring it to full council. That's my problem.
And I apologize for not having the call committee. We're looking at regular scheduled committee meetings. The next one, we couldn't bring this to you until January, and some of this is mission critical.
Well, I think to Ms. McGriff's point, she was willing to call a meeting just for them to discuss this before tonight's council meeting. I mean, I know that the IT director is not an IT person, but, people that are at the top of the food chain aren't necessarily experts in everything that they're overseeing, but it's their job to make sure that they oversee that the staff is doing what they're supposed to be. And we've had obviously a failure of epic proportion here.
But we already knew that.
One thing that's in here is the $40,000 for an IT assessment to provide management council an objective overview, blah, blah, blah. Sounds to me like y'all have already done that.
We have.
So where were the funds to pay for that? Because you're asking for it here, right?
So basically, what we're asking for is kind of a reimbursement of those, because what's come up is a million other little things. So originally, when Allison approached me about it, I had planned to do a transfer from, I think, hardware or software to help cover the cost, and otherwise just defer, those items. But because other things have come up that has cost us money that we had to take care of in hardware and software, that's not really there anymore. And so we are coming now to see if we can get a reimbursement of that funding, so that, the budget's not completely in the hole, because what keeps happening is we keep finding more and more things that need immediate attention. And so I'm trying to take the opportunity to right-size what we can so that we can take care of things as they pop up during the fiscal year.
That assessment was what brought these items to our attention.
So you really spent the $40,000 without council permission, is that correct?
It was in the budget transfer. It was in the budget.
Kim,
You know, I got issues with it because of the way it's being put together, and like Mr. Carnes said, this is not the first time something like this has happened, where we have equipment and it's either life-saving equipment that's out of date, and all of a sudden we got to spend $1 million tomorrow to fix it. This is just it happens too often. This type of thing happens too often, and I agree. It should have gone to the admin committee for them to vet it and make recommendations where this money was going to come from.
Kim,
Yes, sir.
first of all, this is your first meeting as interim deputy administrator, so
Welcome
I've
to
gotta-
the hot seat.
I've got to give you
Okay.
a lot of credit for having the wherewithal and nerve to bring up this large an amount to us on the very first meeting. So, welcome to the hot seat, as Mr. Carnes said. But getting back though to your point about things that discovering things need to be fixed. As I read this and read the administrator's report, it came to me: have we really studied it enough yet to know what all needs to be fixed? I mean, are we going to come back in a month and realize we need another 100,000 or 200,000? And then another thing that came to mind to me, which is shouldn't be directed at you, and I'm not really trying to be critical, but just a thought I had was, should we not be pushing really hard and fast to get the IT director in, and it might be our current interim one? I'm not saying he's not the man for the job, because I'm not here for daily activities. Or do we go ahead and get that process done so we bring that person in? Because a consultant's going to be telling us a lot of good things, I'm sure, but I'm sure whoever is going to be the next director, unless it's our current interim who's already been involved in the process, may have some other ideas too that might be a higher priority. I'm scared I don't know, I guess because we haven't been exposed to it, I don't have enough to really discuss it intelligently, other than to say, I'm just kind of worried what else might come up down the road.
I don't know a lot about IT, but I know that if we have failure, we cannot have failure in IT. We can argue about this, but I've had computer crash at my business before, and that is not a fun process, and that's just one small little operation. When they're talking about the main server at the end of the life, I don't, my personal opinion is, I don't know exactly when we should have been informed, but I'm concerned that for the end of the year, that if this equipment fails, we could have a catastrophe.
And Mr. Chair,
that is
I do
unacceptable.
understand your point, and
Do you mind if
I
we
understand your point, but I do,
ask if he come, our IT director, come and give us do you mind giving us a little bit of background on?
let me
the-
say
the-
this, Mr. Chair, while
okay.
he's coming. I do understand your point because we do not want a failure in the IT department. But I also understand that we gotta stop what we're doing and stop nickel and diming ourselves up to where we need this, we need that. We need an overall comprehensive assessment to determine exactly what we need, so they won't come back when the new director comes in and say, we need this and that and that. Do we have time to wait on the comprehensive assessment?
I don't
I
know.
don't know.
The only thing that about computers and IT and all of these programs, all this stuff changes from week to week. What we're approving here, in 2 years, it might be gone, just like our consoles over there. They're, I don't know how many years old.
We need to know.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, before Scott starts, we've taken into consideration some of the things that, we are hunting a new IT director. We're going through that process right now. That is underway. And that is why we're proposing to contract with Founders rather than make substantial recurring investments, personnel. We have the recommendation from VC3. But as you mentioned, we need to have the new director involved. Two things that are really critical are hardware components, and Scott can certainly talk on that. Our Exchange server and proposing to go to a hosted Office 365. That was one thing VC3 very strongly recommended, was moving towards cloud-based rather than in-house, because you have much more reliability. The server upgrades, and I'll be the first to tell you, I don't understand a lick of this. I'm just an office kind of person. Scott can tell you. But virtualizing the servers gives them the ability, if you have one section crash, you can spin up other sections. So those are the two hardware issues. Other than that, contract with Founders is so we don't make permanent recurring decisions.
How did we decide on the contract with Founders? Did we solicit bids from other people?
For this, we went out, VC3 gave us a proposal. They wanted to come in and basically just run the system. They wanted to outsource everything. We've done that. We did that approximately 10 years ago or so. Did not work out well. VC3 is very good at consulting, but not running their system. Founders just recently got into this business, and it was really just kind of a stopgap measure until we have time to do more analysis. But the two pieces of hardware, Scott, I'll let you talk about that, because that's way outside my realm.
So I've been with the county coming on 5 years. I've been doing business with the county for over 12. So we've had, over the years, the county's direction has been a lot, we've been using a lot of free source, openware, things that should never be in any type of business of any size. So as far as trying to address the issues that we have, the funding that we have, let me just start by saying the next fiscal, you guys will see more of this, because we need a complete overhaul of everything that we have. What we're asking for right now is the foundation, just so we can get by for the next 3 to 5 years. So once we start talking about the mail server right now, I don't want to go a whole lot in depth, but just very broad, that's an on-site that's on here, which means we need to have it backed up. I found out we are not backing up our mail, so there's no redundancy right there. So if it would go down, we're going to be in really bad shape. Our file shares, that's where everybody stores everything for the county. That's built on a freeware system, and that was built in-house. So we're having issues now with it. If that goes down, we lose everything in the county shares. That's everything that everybody stores countywide. So the things I agree, I think we need to, what I'm trying to ask, regardless who's in the seat of my job, these are the things that we need to have immediately. And you will see in the next 3 to 5 years, we need major fixes on a lot of things. It's nobody's fault as far as, like, I don't feel it's Steve's fault. It's hard to have a non-technical person judge what a technical person's gonna do. So, but I'm letting you guys know, I don't care who's in the seat, things need to get fixed. We have immediate things that need to be fixed right now, and there's gonna be more. So that server stack that's right now, we don't have, if one goes down, we are down. The county will be completely shut down. So what I'm asking for is having 2. So if one fails, we can immediately spin the second one up. What I'm also asking for with that is to get rid of our free file share and have this part of this new server SAN stack. That's not really a true word for it, but so that's that. And for the mail, I want to get the mail off. That'll free up about 5 terabytes of data so that I can actually start backing up stuff that we are not now. We have servers on site that have no backups for them at all.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Ms. McGrail.
And I am definitely not a technical person, because I couldn't tell you anything. I do understand what you're saying, and it's not your fault, it's not anybody's fault that we need this. I'm just talking about the process to get it approved was not done correctly.
Okay.
We could have not been out here having all this discussion if it had gone to committee like it was supposed to. And we could have cleaned it up, answered all the questions, got it to full council, and explained to our other council members what was going on. That's all I'm saying.
Well, Mr. Griff, it is somebody's fault, because the IT department should not be in this mess.
I agree.
It is somebody's fault. Let's get away from this, it's nobody's fault, because that's not true. Somebody didn't
I'm
plan
saying
properly,
because
or
it's
somebody didn't know
down.
what they did. It may not be you, but it is somebody's fault.
I'm saying the equipment down, not that it's anybody's fault, that we can't.
Yeah, but we have to have people that can manage departments and project these things. I mean, to me, it's just absurd, and what you're telling me scares me to death, and I hope we get it fixed as quick as possible.
I work about 70 hours a week trying to keep
I
the
appreciate your efforts.
afloat, so, and with the limited staff. If you guys got a second, I would like to touch upon the founders thing also. So,
Before you go there, if you don't mind, welcome to the hot seat too, just like you.
thank you.
And this too will pass.
Yep.
I'm just curious, as far as hosting in the cloud.
Yes.
And I'm not an IT guy either, so you can sit here and talk circles around me. But in the reality of it all, is that what other counties are doing now?
So yes. So Office, are you talking about Office 365,
Well,
the very
the
first thing?
Exchange server to hosted Office
So
365.
what that does is that gets it off of us. Right now, we are contracting with a company to help us maintain what we have on site. Once we go cloud-based, that'll solve all that. It's on Microsoft to make it work, right?
Yeah, but all I'm asking though is just simple,
Oh, okay.
other counties, meaning York County or Greenville County.
Yes, we meet, we
Richland.
used to, we didn't do it this year, but we meet once a year with all the counties of the state, and the majority of them are Office 365. Yes, sir.
Do the counties, so y'all probably have a conference.
Yes, yep.
It's good. So you guys are truly somewhat finding the best methods and things of that nature. And we're just, Lancaster County's been slow to the draw to get
Yeah,
there,
we're
obviously.
probably 5 to 7 years behind on most things. I feel we are doing good on some, but on most of that, yes.
And on cloud security and things like that, so much being stored on the cloud now.
Yes.
I mean, I'm talking about everybody's cell phones and all these things. What's the security risk? For Lancaster County, not for my phone. I'm talking about.
For
just
Lancaster County, well, so part of that is there's something called, I don't want to give all the names, but there is built in, so there's additional security that we're also purchasing to go with that. So that'll tie into it. I don't want to give the name because
That's fine.
it's easy to go around.
You're
Yes.
not concerned about security when we.
I'm not, no,
take that
because
step.
they actually we have to pay a separate version for the sheriff's office because the South Carolina Law Enforcement Department actually backs Office 3. It's a different entity because we have to show that the vendors are vetted and everything else. So no, I actually feel really good about going to.
And just one more quick point, Councilman Carnes alluded to it, is, you know, somewhere we need to, just as we program in buying the ambulances or the trucks, as they call it, EMS, 2 a year, things like that, we need to look forward to a plan of acquisition that we can budget into and know that.
I haven't found, there should be a strategic plan that we should state every 5 years, everything should be bought up. That has never been done.
Yeah, I'm saying that we need
so-
to do it.
So yes, that is number one thing that needs to be done. We need to have some type of plan, because I can tell you right now, we need to change everything out in between the 4 to 5 year mark. So that's something that should have always been known. That should have never been, oh my gosh. But you're talking about that, and I'm talking, apply that to everything IT, because within a couple years, you're already gonna be old. So I'm talking from our licensing to our servers, to our desktops, to anything else that actually we touch.
Again, that's all I got. Thank you for what you're doing.
All right, at this time, it seems, we appreciate it, Scott.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. That there's 2 items that are very, very critical. The Exchange server to be hosted by Office 365 and the file share and server upgrade. Am I correct, Mr. Willis?
Yes, sir. Those are 2 pieces of hardware, and again, I apologize, but I'm certainly willing, we'll take, like I said, the 40,000 we've already spent. We can talk about that later. The founders, we can talk about at admin. You know, we don't need to dawdle on those, but certainly can talk about those at admin and then address those first meeting in January. The 2 pieces of hardware, since I found out about this, I lose sleep over these and would request that we go ahead and move forward on those 2.
What's that total?
Anyone be interested in?
That would be
Making
the
a motion.
Exchange server and the file share server upgrade.
193,000.
Yes,
Mr.
ma'am.
Chairman, I'll make the motion to do those 2 things at this time.
It needs to be amendment, because
And
we've
we'll
already
bring the-
made a motion
Oh, we
to
didn't
bring it
make
to
the
the
motion?
floor, yeah. We need to amend it.
Make an
I'll
amendment.
make the motion to amend, that we
Second.
fund those 2 items.
I'll second that,
Have a motion for Mr. Blackman, second for Mr. Carnes.
with the caveat that we never have this discussion again,
And,
ever.
all right, before I vote on this, when it comes to us in January, please have us some kind of needs assessment on other IT stuff we're gonna need till at least to June of next year.
Yes, sir. We have that, part of that is part of the VC3. We'll have that.
Updated for
And
us.
I hope whoever the person who is helping out would have us a cycle, some sort of cycle that we need to update as years go by. Like that, we can look at what our needs are in the budget and budget for that as the years go.
And that was part of what we were looking with Founders, because they have experience with centralized IT, but a variety of branches and various different loans and insurance and a whole host of other things. They're financial, but they have a lot of the same attributes we have, and that's where we were hoping to steal a lot of good information from Founders.
All right, we need to vote on an amendment for Mr. Blackman. All in favor of the amendment?
One second, do
Go
we
ahead.
need to state an amount or just those 2 items?
Put a dollar amount on it, don't you?
Well, as indicated here in our.
As
It's
indicated, yeah.
indicated. Okay. Any more questions on the amendment? Any more discussion? All in favor of the amendment, raise your right hand. We have 6 for and none against. Mr. Honeycutt's absent. Any more discussion on this resolution? So we're ready to vote on resolution 1127-R2020 as amended. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have a vote of 6 for, none against, and Mr. Honeycutt is absent. So the resolution passes. Let's move down to 8C, Resolution 1128-R2020 regarding authorizing the submission of a FEMA grant application. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion from Mr. McGriff. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Blackman. Mr. Willis, Mr. Burns, or Mr. Egger?
Mr. Chairman, I'll let Scott, not Scott, he's not here tonight, Rox take the technical part. Would note that previously, council authorized us to submit a bi-state grant application for this exact same project through the BUILD program. Unfortunately, we were not funded. So we're proposing to try the same thing through FEMA through their BRIC program, Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities. Cash match would remain $40,000, same as it was under the previously council-approved authorization. This would not actually hit till the fiscal year 22-23 budget. And talking with Kim, more likely would come from MS4. And Rox, if you'll cover the technical part of what the grant would accomplish.
Sure, and we're excited to be able to potentially apply for this grant. Again, just to refresh everyone, this, as Steve mentioned, this came up around the April timeframe earlier this year where we applied for the BUILD grant. The grant will ultimately fund if awarded, the grant will fund a study to evaluate the relationship between our road infrastructure. When I say road infrastructure, I mean bridges, culverts, pipes, and whatnot, and flooding, and try to identify the choke points that are causing our flooding conditions and what kind of improvements we can make to resolve that. And so we're excited to be partnering with 10 other communities in Union County to do this bi-state study. The positive news we have is we went through a preliminary screening process some months ago, and this project scored in the top 20% of all of the preliminary applications from the BRIC program. So we actually are excited that this has a very good chance of being funded. So I'll certainly take any questions that you may have.
Rox, the one thing I read in here was 25%. Then I read 29%. Was that just the two different things Mr. Willis was referring to? Maybe the first one that we didn't get was 25, and this is a 29%.
So no, all right. So the BUILD grant, and that's the DOT, that's the DOT grant that we were not awarded, had a 20% matching requirement.
25%.
20%. So the BRIC grant that we're with FEMA that we're applying for now has a minimum 25% grant. The strategy with this grant is actually to keep everyone's match, again, with all of our partners in North Carolina, constant, and so to keep the $40,000 constant on this, which will bring us up to 29% match on the project, with the idea that it helps us score higher than other applicants that are only matching at the minimum 25%.
So one other quick question is, this is South Carolina, us, and a lot of North Carolina, but you feel good with getting, if we can make this thing work, that we won't get shorthanded in the study and the possible solutions?
No, and I just kind of remind you, the reason why we're at the table for this grant is certainly we know that water doesn't respect state boundaries, right? It goes where it goes, and water is generally, the Catawba Basin is generally coming up from Union County and coming through, and so the train of thought on the Union County side was, we're going to go for this, try to develop the study and paying for it with grant awards. If the study goes well, or if the grant the grant gets funded, we do the study, identify a bunch of projects, bridges that need to be upsized or pipes that need to be uncorked. What happens to Lancaster County that's downstream? Well, we're going to get a lot more water. And so in the spirit of partnership, they extended the olive branch and saying we should really develop something comprehensively so we don't do great things up in Union County to Lancaster County's detriment. And so, no, I think we will have an equal share at the table. Our stormwater department has been a part of the grant application process and kind of coming up with the technical information Their project manager on the Union County side is a Lancaster County resident, and so that also speaks to the desire to kind of the partnership aspect of it. So no, I think we feel confident we'll get an equal share, if
Right.
not more.
I got a couple of questions. What parts of Lancaster County is this going to involve?
It's predominantly going to be the Panhandle area in the Catawba Basin, roughly around 128 square
But that
miles.
extends beyond 5, I believe.
Right, and I believe, generally speaking, you're talking about like the Camp Creek area north. Where
Yeah, the reason I ask that, because the funding they said was coming from the MS4. Why does funding not come from the whole county when it's going to benefit an area bigger than the MS4 district?
Well, again, we haven't drilled down exactly where the funding is going to be coming from. Again, as Steve mentioned, it's going to be fiscal year 22 expense, and actually, in reality, it could even be a fiscal year 23 expense. The way Union County invoices, they're going to front the money, so. It's very reasonable to have some MS4 money paid for it because the vast majority of the subject area is going to be in the MS4, but it's also perfectly reasonable to have a general fund contribution to it as well.
I think that's fine. I just heard the administrator said they thought that this would come from the MS4 fund, and that raised a concern for me.
Yes, sir.
Rox, I had one thought in reading this information going on it is, we've had several instances up in the Panhandle where we've approved developments and it has caused problems within the vicinity development. Calvin Hall is one thing. We've got where we occasionally had a little flooding on Calvin Hall to where now we're overpassing the road and shutting the road down at times. And I would think it would be in the best interest of the county if we looked at when we're doing upgrades to the UDO to add a stipulation in there that we do a stormwater study for
Downstream analysis.
load and identify those kind of issues where the development needs to help pay for enlarging the pipe or whatever needs to be done so that we don't have these issues that keep cropping up and, you know, it's affecting the residents that are there more than it's affecting the new residents.
I can't agree with you more. And what I would say to that is, the good news is that the county engineer and Mr. DeBose and even Allison Alexander, when she was here, were collaborating on an amendment to the stormwater ordinance to try to bring it up to the standard it needs to be to manage the growth pressures that we're experiencing. And I just off the top of my head, it's on its second draft, maybe even a third draft. And I spoke to the county engineer as recently as late last week about, bringing that to a conclusion so the council will have something before then that they can consider and adopt to help improve stormwater, the management of stormwater.
I got a question. Is our stormwater engineer, is he not looking at these projects when they are being built and looked at of what's effect for runoff's gonna be, or they?
For the new ones, that is correct, but there's a lot up there that still falls under DHEC. And as you recall, when we first started stormwater, DHEC said we were getting it all. And then DHEC changed their mind, and they have pulled back and retained enforcement on projects that they originated. So there's a mix up there.
Go ahead, Billy.
I'm through.
Can I comment on that? Because we are getting very poor representation from DHEC enforcing things, which makes it tough on us as the county because all the residents know is that we've got a development, we're overseeing the building permits and things like that in development, but then we come in and they've got a problem with stormwater, and the first thing we hear out of the mouth of the stormwater department is, yep, you got a problem, but you need to call a lawyer or whatever to take care of it. And to me, that is unfair to our constituents that we don't have the tools in place to take care of the issues that they're facing, especially when you still have a developer and a contractor in the neighborhood that's ignoring the fact that they know that this needs to be done and they won't do anything about it.
Well, how do we handle a problem like that?
Generally, what happens is, Rox can comment on the technical details on this. If our stormwater folks see something, they contact DHEC enforcement, send them pictures, here's a violation we've observed, but enforcement activity remains with DHEC. Rox?
Yeah, no, I think that covers it. I think just keeping in mind, a lot of our projects and that have issues like the one you're describing are ones that the county has inherited. I mean, or that the county stormwater department has inherited from DHEC. And while the staff tries to be certainly a technical resource for residents in helping just identify confirm if there is a problem and what the likely source of the problem is, the county is very limited in being able to enforce a solution to that problem since we weren't the permitting agency. The county stormwater department would, I think, very much likely to take over these projects. And I think at one time they had, and it was removed from their authority fairly early on. And so our hands are tied, I think is the biggest challenge.
Well, maybe we need to speak to our state delegation about this.
I think we
assume
ought
they've
to.
got more pull with DHEC than we do.
We could certainly try to reopen those conversations.
I think the conversation ought to be opened and it ought to be pretty forceful.
I mean, I was visiting a site Saturday, and the folks there, they're halfway through getting the development done, and they're talking about already having cracks in their slabs and stuff from things that are going on around them, or either there was poor preparation, and yet, the developer's still there working and going on, and, the last thing I want is us to have another issue on a smaller scale than what we had in Sun City, where there were things that weren't compacted correctly, the land's sliding away from people's houses, and they're having to go in and jack up the foundations.
And Mr. Carter, I will remind that, yes, development services as a whole, we have talked about new positions in the division to try to help at least put some resources towards those issues. At the budget time, we talked about having, I can't recall what the actual, we keep calling it Dirt Master and behind the scenes. I think I've forgotten what we officially put on the budget reports, but to have a position like that that can go out while sites are being constructed and making sure proper compaction is happening, and again, not issuing a certification of any sort, but just using good judgment and some tools, be able to just fact check the developers. Again, with the nature of how COVID kind of impacted our budget, that was not reasonable to include. We've talked about adding infrastructure inspectors as well to make sure our infrastructure is in good order. So we've got our eyes on that, and we just would love to have council support at the next budget cycle.
All right,
We'll be bringing that up next budget.
Yeah, I think right now we're getting off the subject a little. If anybody wants this brought up, we'll be glad to, who's first of the year, we'll look at it. But let's keep our discussion to the grant application right now. Is there any more discussion on it? If not, I think we're ready to vote. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have 6 for, none opposed. Mr. Honeycutt is absent. Resolution 1129-R2020 regarding acquiring quick response vehicles for EMS. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion for Mr.
Second.
Carnes, second for Ms. McGriff. Mr. Willis or Mr. Cato?
Mr. Cato couldn't be here tonight. EMS is swamped, so I'm covering this. Basically, real quickly, we had some funding remaining after we ordered the ambulances, and we were looking at the QRVs for next fiscal year. What we're proposing is go ahead, acquire them this fiscal year. That will free up some capital funding in next fiscal year. We're not asking for any additional money, just repurposing of the capital funding. The 2 QRVs currently, I asked what the mileage was. One of them has 140,000, the other has 130. So would like to use existing capital funding, go ahead and acquire them this fiscal year frees up money for next year.
What'll happen to these vehicles? Will they stay in the county fleet?
No, sir, be changed out.
They'll be traded in, or,
Well,
yeah,
they'll
will it
come
go
off
to
QO.
the maintenance department or recreation?
What happens is if there's another older vehicle, it could go to another department or something like that. We try to rotate vehicles around out of the motor pool or whatever, so we get rid of the worst vehicle in the fleet. So when I say it's leaving the fleet, it might leave EMS. It could conceivably go to
Okay,
another
that
department.
was my
Brandon would
question.
make that call.
Okay. Any discussion? If not, I think we're ready to vote on resolution 1129-R 2020. All in favor, raise your right hand. We had 6 for, none against, and Mr. Honeycutt is absent, so our resolution passes. Okay, we go down to 8E, public hearing and third reading of ordinance 2020-1693 regarding 980 Northfield Drive speculation industrial building special source revenue credit agreement. First, we'll have a report from staff. Mr. Gilbert is not here.
I'm filling in, so
Okay.
we'll keep it moving. On this particular one, there is no change from second reading. This is on non-consent due to the public hearing. This would authorize a 3-year, 50% special source revenue credit to assist with the construction of a 10,100 square foot spec industrial building. This would be located at 9080 Northfield Drive in the 521 Perimeter Business Park. I think you've all heard Jamie talk about the need for additional product. This would help tremendously, and recommend approval.
Any questions for Mr. Willis? Hearing done, we have a public hearing scheduled on this ordinance. Would anyone like to speak? I know no one signed up.
Yes, sir. For the record, nobody signed up.
You would like to speak on this? Please come forward and state your name.
My name is Evan Freeman. I live in northern part of the county. I frequent Northfield Drive all the time because the dump transfer center is over there. That's probably the worst road in the entire Panhandle at this moment. If we're spending money to develop the area, but we don't have a plan for how to get those construction vehicles in and out, we're just going to make the problem worse. And so I hope that we consider the impact for the road that all of our citizens who use that dump have if we develop this building and we put a tax credit on it. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, Northfield is on capital project sales tax 3.
Okay, so, all right.
Better put some real heavy-duty paving in there with all those concrete trucks going in and out.
Yes, sir.
All right, anyone else like to speak? Seeing no one else would like to speak on this matter, I've closed the public hearing, and I'm looking for a motion to bring this matter to the floor.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion from Ms. McGriff, a second from Mr. Carnes. Any discussion?
Yeah, just to reiterate that Northfield Drive is scheduled to be repaved. I don't know what that date is, but it is scheduled to be repaved.
It's a Pago Road, isn't it?
Yes, sir. Pago, if sales tax 2 goes well, it could be a little sooner rather than later, but the will of council.
All right. Any more discussion? We have a motion for approval of third reading of ordinance 2020-1693. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have a vote of 6 for, none opposed, and Mr. Honeycutt is absent. Let's move down to 8F, public hearing and third reading of ordinance 2020-1697 regarding the Cooley Group Incentive Ordinance and Agreement. We'll have a report from Mr. Willis.
Mr. Chairman, members of council, would note there is an amendment that's going to be needed for the red line on this. No substantive change, but we do have some names and need to go ahead and approve. In summary, this would extend an incentive agreement for tax years 2019 through 2028, was correcting a 2019 tax bill error, while making at least 30 jobs with a $15 per hour minimum. For the expansion, it would provide a 20-year fee in lieu with minimum requirement of $2.5 million investment and 10 jobs. Overall, it would provide a 7-year SSRC of 58% if the company maintains 68 jobs. Would note the $14 minimum wage does have an escalator clause in there, and recommend approval.
Any questions for Mr. Willis?
So we've had the motion and the second.
Not yet, I'll do that. We got a public hearing on this one.
Okay.
And for the record, nobody signed up for the public hearing.
Okay, would anyone like to speak on this? Seeing no one would like to speak on this ordinance, I will close the public hearing of this meeting, and I'm looking for a motion to bring this matter to the floor.
So moved.
Second.
From Ms. McGriff, a second from Mr. Graham.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to amend.
Go ahead, Mr. Black.
I move to amend the proposed ordinance 2020-1697 in the form of the red line ordinance attached to the agenda package, including the red line fee in lieu of tax agreement and the red line special source revenue credit agreement, also attached to the agenda packet.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. McGriff.
Could you repeat that, Ms. McGriff, for me, please?
I remember everything you said.
All right, any discussion on the amendment? I think we'll vote on Mr. Blackman's amendment. All in favor of Mr. Blackman's amendment, raise your right hand. We have a vote of 6 for, 0 against. Mr. Honeycutt is absent. Any more discussion on this before we vote on it? Hearing none, we're ready to vote on third reading of ordinance 2020-1697 as amended. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have a vote of 6 for, none opposed, and Mr. Honeycutt is absent. Let's go down to third reading. This is,
Mr. Chairman, I wish to recluse myself from this one,
okay,
and I already did the paperwork.
let's go down to third reading of ordinance 2020-1689 regarding rezoning property from RN to MDR. Applicant is Carolina Ventures One LLC. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion for Mr. Carnes. Who seconded it?
Myself.
Doesn't matter. Billy Mosteller.
Mr. Mosteller. Mr. Burns?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. This, as referenced, this is a proposed rezoning of 155 acres off of Van Wyck Road from the rural neighborhood district to the medium density residential district. Council last heard this item at their October 26th meeting where it passed second ordinance reading. There was a delay between then and tonight, just so the applicant had time to prepare the surveys necessary to create, clean rezoning boundaries, because there are portions of parcels that are a part of this rezoning. So the applicant has done this and is ready for third reading approval, or third reading consideration, rather. And so I'll make myself available for any questions.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Rox, why did the planning commission, and I read that they were concerned with the traffic in that area, but it was unanimous denial. Can you explain that?
Certainly. I mean, so the Planning Commission had concerns about traffic in the area, I think particularly at the intersection of 521 and Van Wyck Road. Parallel to that, I think there were concerns about just general compatibility. They recognized that, you know, the Treetops development was nearby, but I don't think they necessarily as a group considered that to be indicative of how the whole area should develop. So I think at a high level, those were some of the discussion points from that meeting.
And they mentioned something about RFAS and Dave Lau. Can you speak to that, Brian?
I can. Within the last week or two, York County has voted to take off any path for Dave Lyle Boulevard, recognizing that there is really no appetite or funding to be able to do that.
You know, and my concern is you got a unanimous vote against it with the planning commission, and staff is recommending it. So I'm like, which way do you go here? Do you go with the fact that it meets all the requirements, or do you go to the fact that the commission is saying, I don't think this is a good feel for the community? So
I think part of what the commission was looking at, and there was a lot of discussion on, was about Dave Lyle Boulevard and not having a path through there. And, you know, that now has been taken off the table, basically, because, you know, the state has said pretty emphatically that they don't have the funding for it, they're not considering it. York County has basically taken the route off, and if there's not a route from York County, there's certainly no need for a route in Lancaster County. And, you know, I think that there have been discussions about some improvements at the end of Van Wyck Road to try to mitigate some of the traffic as well. I know there was a couple of developments there that were supposed to pay for some improvements. I don't know what's the ones going on. I don't know what happened to the one that's closest to Van Wyck Road. Are they still in play?
There is the, so improvements were done to the intersection with Treetops, right? And there, I think the turn lane was extended, and I think there's an overlay done just to help with the road condition. There is a project at Van Wyck, right at Van Wyck in 521. There is the Vantage Apartments, which is in the permitting process at present, not too far off from probably getting construction plans. They're going to have turn lanes certainly at their entrance. I would need to refresh myself on what their improvements are at 521, but yes, they did a traffic study and will be making improvements along the corridor. And similarly, with this project, it would result in a subdivision that would generate the need for a traffic study. And so they would have to mitigate the improvements that the traffic expert would deem necessary. And the county would review that parallel at SCDOT.
Question, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Costello.
There at 521 and Van Wyck Road, Rocks, that turning lane, gonna turn left, go north. Are there plenty of storage in that left turn lane for there, or they one time they talked about doing 2 turn lanes there, wasn't they?
The
Developments was talking, I remember something about 2 turn lanes. You might
There was
remember that, Brian?
Yeah, there was initial discussions between SCDOT and Treetops about doing 2 turn lanes there, and SCDOT did not require Treetops to do it, I believe. John's probably more familiar with that than any of us.
So is it off the table? Is it still pending?
As I recall, and again, John could comment on this, it was in the traffic impact analysis, and DOT relieved them of the obligation, said it was not needed based on some signalization issues, but it was DOT that removed it. Right. It was not developer requested or anything.
All right.
DOT sometimes is not our best friend when it comes to going through with what traffic impact analysis recommend and require.
All right, I talked to Mr. Honeycutt earlier today, and his only concern, I think it's just a minor technicality. It says 150 acres, 155 acres more or less. He just wanted to make sure that they couldn't add any additional property to this. So if somebody would just make a short comment on that.
I think,
Let Mr.
I think that probably, I mean, describing real property as such and such acres more or less is fairly common practice. I think part of it is probably a result of just not having a precise to the tenth of an acre survey of these properties. And to Mr. Burhan's point, some of these properties are portions of property that were being rezoned, and I don't know that, as he referenced, there were clean survey boundaries yet. So the 155 acres is an approximation. I think as with surveys complete, and when site plans are submitted, you'd know the exact acreage, but it's not a situation where more acreage is going to be added. It might be a tenth of an acre or something.
Yeah, the just to and I agree with Mr. DuBose, and just to complement that, the surveys creating the subject property boundaries have been submitted to the county planning department. They have been reviewed by KDC, our senior planner, who was the project manager for the rezoning process. The plats were deemed consistent with the general representations in the rezoning application, and so staff is confident that there will be precise boundaries approved if it's approved with this ordinance, and it won't be kind of willy-nilly add in an extra 10 acres here or there at a later date. So it will be a defined boundary with this ordinance.
But every parcel that's going to be in this has already been identified, right?
That's my understanding.
So, the developer can't come back and say, I'm gonna grab a whole nother parcel and add it to it.
I think to Rox's point, some of these parcels are portions of, and therefore, getting those clean lines ties them down. They've submitted their surveys. Now, what they've submitted is what they've got as far as the rezoning is concerned. I'm agreeing with you. I just stated it in a longer, more convoluted manner.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. DuBose. Any more discussion? Hearing none, we're ready to vote on third reading of ordinance 2020-1689. All those in favor, raise your right hand. So our third reading of ordinance 2020-1689 passes by 5-4, none against, one recusal, and one absentee. I'm making it a little too complicated, I believe, but would somebody get Mr. Graham, please?
Yeah, I'll get it. Here he comes.
That's
Here he comes.
5011.
Quit talking about him now, he's back.
Yeah. Oh, there he comes.
There's rocks. I thought he went out one door and come in the other.
I know y'all miss me.
And we talked about you.
Yeah, your ears is burning.
All right, let's go down to 8H, third reading of ordinance 2020-1691 regarding authorization of the creation of the Roslyn Residential Improvement District. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion for Mr. Mosteller. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second for Mr. Carnes. Mr. Willis.
Mr. Chairman, members of council, this is coming to you on third reading. Even though it was unanimous last time, it's on non-consent. There are no substantive changes from second reading, but we do have the final exhibits. And John, I thought you probably want to be one to comment on the exhibits.
So these improvement plans these residential improvement districts require an improvement plan which identifies the subject properties and the improvements to be made. That is on page 296 of your agenda for Roslyn. It has tables of the estimated cost of the improvements and the estimated development uses, i.e. residential versus non-residential components. The improvement plan's largely a creature of the Enabling Act, and the verbiage in it is drawn largely from the Enabling Act and the requirements of the Act. The other exhibits to the ordinance are the report on the reasonable basis of assessment, i.e. how the people like MuniCap actually come up with the per unit assessment ultimately, and then the assessment roll. So, again, to cover the improvement plan, and I do want to proactively address some concerns that have been expressed individually to me by some council members. There's some verbiage in this improvement plan, such as in the first paragraph, that the county proposes to provide for the construction and installation of improvements. Elsewhere, it says the county will effect the improvements. That's really aimed at kind of the legal interpretation of those words, which are, you're basically bringing it about. So proposing to provide for the construction and installation by passage of this RID ordinance and approval of these plans and assessments, the county would be providing for the construction of the installation and improvements by issuing bonds to basically refund the developer for those construction efforts that have been identified and those plans identified, specific improvements identified in the plan. There is another issue that was brought up to me is there's verbiage on page 3 about the owner determining the timing of the construction in accordance with separate agreements or necessity of particular improvements for the development. That's largely on their development schedule. I will remind council that this is kind of a two-part process. This ordinance establishes these districts, but the county at a later date still has to issue the bonds and approve issuance of bonds. In discussing the matter with our bond counsel, it's my understanding that those agreements on the bond escrow are some of the controlling documents referenced here as far as the timing of construction. But again, it's referenced within the act and folded into the improvement plan. Likewise, there was a concern about some verbiage on page 5 of the plan that says, pursuant to the act, the county may contract with the owner or other third parties for construction of the improvements. Mick Mulvaney kind of touched on this earlier. Some of these RIDs could be multiple owners, and they could be county-identified improvements. That clause really permits the county to contract with the owners versus doing it themselves. And I will also say that verbiage provides some flexibility for the county on the 4% projects that are built into the RID statute. As y'all will recall, 4% of the bond issue goes to the county as a development fee. That verbiage would allow the county, if it was advantageous to the county, to contract with the developer owner to handle those 4% projects and realize cost savings in the event that the county's 4% project on a given RID is a road improvement and developers are already making road improvements. There's flexibility to allow them to make the county 4% improvement on county's behalf. As far as assessment roll particulars and details, I would defer to Ms. Heiser on that whole component of it, if there are any questions about that. But essentially, as referenced in the agenda item summary, these are very similar to the public works improvement districts. And as Mr. Mulvaney said earlier, they simply allow the off-site improvements to be incorporated within a district. That's about it. If anyone has any questions, make myself available.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment I'd like to offer.
All right.
I move to amend proposed ordinance 2020-1691 in the form of the third reading version of the ordinance included in the agenda package, which includes all exhibits to the proposed ordinance.
I have an amendment from Mr. Carnes. I have a second.
Second.
Second from Mr. Mosteller. Any discussion on this amendment? If not, let's go ahead and vote on the amendment. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval of 6 for and none opposed to Mr. Honeycutt's absent. All right. Any more discussion on third reading of the ordinance 2020-1691?
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to say that through this process, I've been asking and asking for information. And I'm just very bothered by the way this whole process has worked. I don't know where I got this document from. It's a document that says steps for establishing a residential improvement district. I really don't know where it came from, but it was in my files and in my office, and I maintained it for posterity's sake here. And in this case, it talks about number 2, petition to county council. The petition must contain a legal description of the real property and contain an improvement plan, which we just got tonight, or got for tonight's meeting. Projected time schedule for accomplishment of the improvement plan, which is something I had to ask for. The estimated cost, which we've been given that all along, and the cost to be derived from the assessments or from the bonds and the obligations secured by the assessments, together with the proposed basis and rates of assessments. Now, you know, it would appear to me going forward, that's what we ought to have given to us at first reading. Not that it can't be changed through amendments and things of that nature, but I have just been struggling with this whole idea. And like Mr. Mulvaney said, this will probably be the first one in the state. And I even checked with York County Council, they don't do these. They don't see a need to do them. They will do them for industrial purposes or whatever, or infrastructure purposes, but they just don't do residential because the development is here in these 2 counties in this area. And then I go to the page 3 that Mr. DeBose referenced, and it talks about an agreement, separate agreement made between the owner and the county. Well, to me, the timing of that agreement should be now. Should already have been in effect or a part of this package, not a later time. And I just don't feel like that we have walked this walk in a manner that it should, and I'm just not comfortable with it. And I've tried my best to get comfortable with it. I voted in the second reading, even without attachments, just to keep carrying it forward and things of that nature. I also have expressed concern that as we have these improvements made or constructed, that we somehow make sure that the developer has his equity in there first, or at least proportionate to ours. And that was going to be reassuring to me before this meeting that could be worked out. And I've seen nothing in our package that addresses that. So we are a good council. I'm so proud of each and every one of us. But, you know, it's just hard, I see, for us to be able to vote on something that I'm not sure anybody fully understands. Even as I talk about our administrator trying to approve the progress payments and things of that nature, and we don't even know who the engineer will be that will submit the documents for approval, for payments, as the construction gets completed. And for those reasons, I just don't see how in the world I can vote for this.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question? Because I kind of agree with Alan, but we've never done this before. You know, I had some kind of thoughts about it myself. Can John or either Franny answer some of those questions and tell us why we are doing what we're doing and not doing all those things that Alan said we should be doing? And Alan, I think you got that same form back when we were talking about this at some point. Can anyone answer any of those concerns that Alan had?
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of council. It's good to be with y'all tonight. For the, to follow the process in the statute for the establishment of a RID, the first step is the presentation of a petition to county council. That petition was presented back, I think, in September, and the improvement plan was attached to that document, to the petition, together with the meets and bounds legal description of the district. So that information has been available, and y'all voted basically based on that petition. You voted to go forward and have a public hearing, and this ordinance is the result of y'all's favorable action on the petition. So there was the petition that was filed, y'all adopted the resolution, and the resolution's what ordered the public hearing. So now we've got the ordinance process. The improvement plan is an attachment to the ordinance, and in neither case, this ordinance or the one coming up next, there have been no material changes. Nothing really substantially has changed in the improvement plan. The nature of the improvements basically have been the same since each plan was attached to a petition back in the earlier in the fall. There has been one change in the definition of improvement, capital I improvement, in this Roseland ordinance and in the Roseland plan, because it was at the meeting in November where there was a discussion about the regional park becoming the improvement upon which the 4% fee will be spent. So that's really the only change in the Roseland ordinance and really in the plan, is to make it clear that when bonds are issued, if bonds are issued, 4% of the par amount of the bonds will be available to the county, and the county has selected the regional park. So the other attachments to this ordinance, which are the assessment roll, the reasonable basis, et cetera, were available, I guess, Monday. You know, in this process, there is a little bit of lag time, if you will, or things get slowed down a little bit because your counselors, John and myself, we are not drafting the improvement plan. We are not drafting the assessment and the reasonable basis and the rate methodology. That's being done by a third-party consultant, Municap, that's done work with the county before. So as far as the details or the high points in the assessments, I think that we have been clear and unchanging. If you look at the summary sheet that is attached to the ordinance, the maximum amount of the assessment, annual assessment for Roseland is $1,550. So unless this gets amended by further action of this council, which I would not foresee, you know that the people that buy these lots or homes are going to pay no more than this $1,550. Now, the bond issue will be a separate issue, separate matter that will come to council in maybe 1 or more years. Lennar is apparently going to be doing an awful lot of this work ahead of time, work on their development before they're ready to ask the county to issue these bonds. And so the details of how the bond money will be spent, how the requisitions would be handled, those will all be dealt with in the bond issue. So not to worry the Lennar, but just by creating this district and giving this third reading tonight, y'all really aren't doing anything to make money available for these improvements. That doesn't happen unless and until y'all issue bonds. Now, presumably, that will happen. I mean, we certainly aren't jumping through all these hoops just so we can, say, yeah, well, we've done that, but now we're not going to issue the bonds. So, I mean, presumably this council or the council next year or 2 years from now would have the comfort level that this is the right thing to do. But, so this is a step in a process, and if there, I'd be glad to try to answer any additional or more specific questions, but John and I have reviewed these documents. We believe that they are consistent with the requirements of state law, And they have been prepared by a third party who's very experienced in working through these types of transactions in South Carolina.
I just got one more. This is the first time that we've done it, first time in the state. Can you speak to the risk that we're taking if this passed?
Yes, ma'am. The risk would be associated with if you issue bonds. When these bonds are issued, there'll be special revenue bonds, and the pledge will be of the assessments that are to be levied on the property. So the risks are that the assessments won't be paid, and that the debt service then will not be paid. There's no risk to the county in terms of its credit rating. There is no risk to the county in terms of your constitutional debt limit. And the way that I understand the development process to be planned is that the developer is going to start this development, and they will have an awful lot of work done so that you will see sort of their skin in the game before you are ever asked to issue bonds. And there's never a guarantee. There's always some risk that we could have something worse than 2008. I mean, we could, 2008 to 2020, you know, something can always be worse. But generally speaking, if you've got a developer with pretty deep pockets and they're putting their money in the ground, then you have a higher level of comfort that they are not going to let the bonds go into default.
You did.
All right, let Mr. Hardy speak.
Well, I had one question for Fran. You did say that council could decide not to issue the bonds.
That is a separate legislative act.
But I would think a developer would take legal action to commit this.
Now,
That would be an argument in court. I don't think this one, but that would be a possibility.
We've already talked through that, and that's not the opportunity that's out there. You have the choice to either to issue or not issue. And John and Franny will tell you, I sort of screamed on the phone when we talked about that a couple of weeks ago, but there's nothing I can do about it. As far as skin in the game, I think it's important for you all to know that as far as Roseland is concerned, we've already spent $27,381,832 on the purchase of the property. So there's skin in the game today. In addition, we've already spent, as of today, and if somebody required invoices, I could produce them. We've spent $4.6 million in land development already. And if you go out there today, you won't see much done. There's a lot to do. We have another, so that's $31,984,120 spent to date on Roseland, already that I could prove. The tax records will show what we spent to purchase it. We have another $136 million to spend on land development. That's just pure infrastructure. That's about $75,000 per home site in development costs, for a total of $167,984,120. That's what we have left to spend. This is a billion-dollar enterprise that we're building here. The tax base that's coming to this county because of it is going to be incredible. So I only say that to say there's skin in the game. We're asking for total net proceeds allowable of $31 million of the $167,984. There's some serious skin in the game in Roseland. Now, for the second one, I'll just tell you real quick, and that's, I'm sorry, we'll have 81.55% of the total proceeds of Roseland on Lennar's dime, and then 18.45% on the homeowner's dime. In the other project, just to give you a quick heads up, it's a total of $57,615,000 in total cost, of which we've already spent $9.435 on the property, another $5.180 million spent on land development for $14.6, and we're going to ask for net proceeds not to exceed $7 million. So we've spent already at Harris Mill 14.6, and we're asking for a not to exceed of 7. So there's serious skin in the game from Lennar's perspective. And I can answer anything else that you want me to answer.
I'm good.
Well, I'm real curious. Mick Mulvaney was in the state when was this bill written or whatever he brought in? It's been a while and nobody in South Carolina has used this thing?
And I can tell you the reason why is because we've all been able to use bonds and we didn't have residential The RID allows you to go to off-site, as Franny described back in September. If you read the first page of what we gave you back in the executive session that night, it tells you that it's because of the off-site infrastructure.
Yeah, but why wouldn't all our counties in the state use it if it's such a great thing? And I also talked to somebody from York County, and they said, no, they got enough houses over there. Now, the Roslyn one, I'm probably going to support because I believe that's in an area that needs promotion. The Mill Harris one, I got some issues with.
Well, I'll answer your question, and I think that York County is correct in that they said they haven't used it to date. However, as most of you know, we bought the Spratt property, and we are developing that property. It's called Elizabeth, named after Thomas Spratt's wife. And that property, the bonds are already approved through county council prior to the entitlement being done. And we are going in for a RID the same way we're coming in for a RID here. They just don't know that it's a RID. They just think it's bond money. But the only way for us to pay for all the infrastructure that they've asked us to pay for and that SCDOT has paid for is for us to do a RID. So it's a technicality, Councilmember Graham. It's a RID, which is a form of a bond, but these two attorneys can say it better than I can. But it is, and we're going for it. And it's already approved in the rezoning for Elizabeth.
Well, the benefit I see for the county is we're trying to bring some growth south, and there's a $10 to $12 million sewer off.
It's a minimum of 9.8 million.
Off-site sewer improvements that will open up.
It's going to open up 3,400 acres that's not opened up today.
For residential and industrial, right. For up the Riverside Road area.
We've had quite a bit of discussion with the economic director about what it's doing and timing, because timing is so important to some of these new companies that want to come here. So we're pushing as hard as we can. As part of the question and part of the answer that Franny had, we're not going to ask for, if you go back and look at the schedule, most of this infrastructure isn't in until late 21 or mid 22. We can't ask for any reimbursement until after that, so we can prove to you and your engineer and our engineer discuss, the payment. So therefore, we're going to have even more skin in the game before we go forward.
How many houses are y'all building in Elizabeth? I know when that first was talked about, there were about 3,500 houses, or residential units that are supposed to be in there.
We've limited to 1,860, and that's what the planning department has approved, is the 1,860. So really, I think it's like 1.21 to 1.3 units per acre we limited to.
John, could you mention to council real quickly, because I didn't know this until the other day talking to Brad Busey, but the water system improvements that Water and Sewer District's looking at is part of this to give redundancy, have another line over to Riverside, so if something were to happen to that one line on 521, the county's not dry.
Right. I don't know how to speak to it other than to say I think builders and developers at times get taken advantage of. And I think this is one of those times where we're getting taken advantage of. But we're happy to do it. As I said in my opening remarks over a year ago on this, to me, this was very important for me personally. It was one of the two deals I wanted to do to end my career. The other one was to build the bridge to come over the river and connect, which we dedicated, and there's land, as Rox can attest to, there's land on the northeast corner of Treetops that would handle a 4-lane highway if it ever did come across the river, that we've already dedicated. So I'm glad you guys didn't say, let's keep some more property off of the gentleman before, because it's already there and it's already dedicated. So anyway, I hope I answered your question.
Any more questions? Thank you, Mr. Hardy. Okay, any more discussion? Did we vote on our amendment?
Yes, we voted and approved the amendment.
Okay. All right, so we're ready to vote on third reading of ordinance 2020-1691 as amended. All in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? Third reading passes by a vote of 5 for, 1 opposed, and Mr. Honeycutt is absent. So let's go to third reading of ordinance 2020-1690 regarding authorization or creation of the Harris Mill Residential Improvement District. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion from Ms. McGriff. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Carnes. Mr. Willis?
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, basically the same thing. The only thing, this is for the Harris Mill development as opposed to the Roslyn. This would be third reading. No substantive change, but there is an amendment to bring forth attachments. John, anything different on this one than Roslyn?
Again, the amendment to the improvement plan basically incorporates, identifies other road improvements, which would be the 4% county project. That had to be added in there. Otherwise, the exhibits attached are the reasonable basis of assessment is Exhibit B, and then the assessment roll, and the rate method is Exhibit C. But no, there no real substantive amendments from the prior reading of the incorporation of those exhibits.
Mr. Chair, I have a.
Go ahead, Mr. Mossett.
I move to amend proposed ordinance 2020-1690 in the form of a third reading version of the ordinance. Included in the agenda package includes all exhibits to the proposed ordinance.
I have an amendment from Mr. Mostello, second from Ms. McGriff. Discussion on the amendment. We're ready to vote on the amendment. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have 6 for, none opposed, and Mr. Honeycutt's absent. All right, any more discussion on third reading with this ordinance?
Yes, I got discussion.
Go ahead.
This one, to me, is vastly different than Roslyn. Roslyn is an area where we want to promote growth. This one is an area where we have growth. We don't need to promote growth. And the road improvements would be required by a traffic impact study. All we're doing is collecting money for the developer. And we're going, like I said in the second reading, we're just adding it to their mortgages. There is also another development going to be on Wilson Creek that's coming before us. I already got the information on the traffic impact study for it. It will be discussed in the INR committee meeting tomorrow. A lot of these road improvements are included in it. I just don't think will they apply for a RID too? Will every developer in Indian land apply for a RID? I mean, that's what we're opening up, a can of worms up there. We had one on that's not a RID, but it was a similar thing. And this council voted it down on Harrisburg Road. Why is this council being inconsistent?
All right, thank you, Mr. Graham. Any more discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to say that, these costs are going to go to the homeowner one way or the other. Because Lennar's, like any other builder, is in the business to make money, and, their costs have to be covered in order to be able to make the development work. They've already committed to this development, and I will be consistent because I feel like that if this is allowed by state law by developers, and I have consistently supported that for developers because it is something under state law that they have the opportunity to ask for.
Oh, well, I just don't think the county should be an intermediary between the cost on this one and the homeowner. The homeowner ought to pay for it, is gonna pay for it through a developer, but why is the developer using the county to collect that money?
Any more discussion? Hearing none, I think we're ready to vote on third reading of ordinance 2020-1690 as amended. All in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? Third reading of ordinance 2020-1690 passes by 4 and 2 opposed, and Mr. Honeycutt is absent. So we will go down to our discussion and action items. We got an appointment to the Lancaster County Transportation Committee, Mr. Timothy Curitan, for District 4 representative. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion for Ms. McGriff, second for Mr. Carnes. All in favor, raise your
Wait, before we discuss, John, vote. His district is incorrect. He's in District 2.
Oh, okay.
He used to be in District 4 until we changed last time. He is now in my district, which is District 2.
Mr. Chairman, also would note, we'll have to send this off to DOT. It's not technically official till DOT sends confirmation.
All right, approve Mr. Curitan for District 2. Can I have a motion for Ms. McGriff and a second?
I thought the legislative delegation appointed these people.
We make the recommendation.
We make the recommendation.
Recommendation to them.
We recommend to the delegation who recommends to DOT. The delegation and DOT have never turned down what council recommends.
Okay.
So we have a motion from Ms. McGriff. Do you have a second?
I'll second it. Nobody has.
Second from Mr. Mostello. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval, 6-0 vote. Discussion of 911 consoles. Mr. Willis or Mr. Purser?
Mr. Chairman, Robert is here if you have any technical questions on the consoles. This has been discussed at Public Safety and at Admin. The current 911 consoles will reach their end of life December of 2021. And as we stressed at both committees, this is not to say that the equipment's going to fail December and just suddenly stop working. It's like Windows 7. Motorola will no longer have software upgrades. They won't guarantee parts availability. We brought this originally when Motorola had a incentive offer for no interest on that. Subsequently, want to make you aware they have offered, if we didn't want the 0% interest, they would offer $25,000 off the list price. This is a little over $1 million, as you'll see in the report, by the time you count in the recording equipment and all that. In talking with finance, the problem we run into is that even if we don't pay for this until later, we have to book it against our accounts right now. So finance has recommended just hold off until the 21-22 budget. We'll address it then. So it'll go through the normal budget process. I'm recommending that. If you have any technical questions. One question that did come up, Councilman Blackman asked, the equipment is on state contract, so it's state contract pricing. I could not get Motorola to give me an average life expectancy on this because it's they're cutting edge equipment. Unofficially, they would say you should have easily 7 to 10 years before you're looking at replacement. They're not going to give me a document that says we're guaranteeing X number of years because technology just changes so doggone fast. But did want to let you know we had those two questions that were asked, and that's the answers we got.
Any discussion? All right, thank you, Mr. Willis. Discussion on replacement of the fire apparatus for the Elgin Fire Department. Mr. Willis.
Mr. Chairman, members of council, As you're aware, engine 601 was totaled in a motor vehicle accident. We had received an estimate from the insurance. I can't give you a specific dollar amount, but we should have that before the end of the year. Basically, $250,000 will be our insurance proceeds on that truck. In order to replace it, because we haven't bid trucks in four years now, I'm requesting authorization to go out to bid. The Fire Commission has approved the specifications on the truck, and this would be the same specifications that would be the base for the trucks in 2 years when we have to do the regular 7-year replacement. But I can't tell you what it's gonna cost, as far as our part, to make up the difference to get a new truck for Elgin until we go out to bid. So tonight, basically what I'm asking for is authorization to go out to bid and then bring that back to you with the anticipation, I gotta have a fire truck for Elgin, so, we're gonna spend that money. Just don't know what it's gonna be
We need
yet.
a motion for that, Steve.
Yes, but would ask a motion just to authorize us to go out to bid.
I move to approve to send it to bid.
A motion from Mr. Mostello, a second from Mr. McGriff to authorize Mr. Willis to go out, get a bid on the fire truck for Elgin. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. We have a vote of 6-0. And so when you get the bid, it'll come back for council?
Yes, sir. Have to come back to council and,
For
we'll
funding
talk to
source.
them, see if we can't get some free barbecue for next year for council members.
All right, item 9D, request for waiving credit card fees for 30 days.
Mr. Chairman, members of council, in talking with Treasurer Carrie Helms, would like to request authorization to waive credit card fees for the collection of property taxes. This is similar to what we did in the springtime with COVID. The intent is try to make it as easy as we can for people to pay their taxes without setting foot in this building. This would be for a 30-day period, December 15th through January 15th. January 15th, it cuts off. If you're late paying, you got to pay the credit card fee. So this would be for a 30-day period. If the CARES Act is extended, we would submit that. Would note that we did submit that and received funding for the credit card fees we waived. Thanks to Finance Department for doing a great job on that. Just for information, in the Phase 1, we submitted $235,685.02. We were approved for $210,294.79. Largest overall, of course, was the Register of Deeds scanning project. We do have submissions in for Phase 2, but we have not heard back from the state yet.
All right.
So on the credit cards we waived before, was it for a 30-day period? And
It
how
was
much-
longer than 30, I believe.
It was longer than, it was between the time periods of April and May, I believe. So maybe
How much did we forego?
about almost $60,000. But that was just mainly vehicles and some delinquent tax. But this one's going to be real property tax during the high collection time period. So council needs to be aware that it's probably going to be, I'm not sure how much it's going to be, but you're going to forego
It's
a
going to be
whole
more,
lot.
no question about it.
It's gonna be a
But
big
if-
number. Too bad I paid by check. I could've paid by credit card.
We looking for a motion?
Yes, sir, I'd have to have a motion to do this.
So moved.
Second.
Motion for Mr. Griff, second from Mr. Mostello. Any discussion? We're ready to vote. All in favor, raise your right hand. Have a unanimous approval, 6-0. Anything else, Mr. Willis?
Mr. Chairman, 10A, 10B will be at the special council meeting on December 30th, along with probably a resolution. Already mentioned about the CAFR award. Kudos to our finance department. Would note that I just saw that Doug Barfield sent the press release out, probably in the media sometime in Wednesday's paper. Everybody knows that Preston Simpson, investigator with the Sheriff's Office, got the SCLUA Investigator of the Year. It's official now. The Lancaster County Sheriff's Office was the Santee Cooper Law Enforcement Agency of the Year for the State Law Enforcement Officers Association. So compliments to both Preston and to the Sheriff's Office in whole.
Great work by the Sheriff's Department. Now I'm looking for a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Motion for Mr. Carnes, second for Mr. Blackman. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval to go into executive session.
You tired? Is Larry taking? Is Larry?
Thanks. Good to see you, man.
Yeah, it's been a while. Things going well for you? Good.
You're going right there?
Going through the motions.
Yeah, indeed. How'd the first meeting go? I didn't really want to make it a couple of
It was good. It went really well. Councilman Mosteller and Collins were there. It was a great amount of motion. We also carved out a little bit of path towards the creek that you see down again to the creek.
Yeah. I thought the earlier, the trimming one, that turned out well, so, great. Apologize, I couldn't get to that. Now you go by there now and see it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, let me ask you a question.
Remind them that you are not
Work with our communications.
Yeah, I mean, I just did what the plan was. I'm not hurt. Don't worry. I'm fine.
So we can do a better job seeing what kind of projects we bring out. We
I can't,
rely on the postcard, contact the information directly.
I've got a good contact person.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to make it, you know, the ILC could open up a Rolodex.
and they were thinking, I said, so.
Communicate, not solicit or, you know.
I will, I'll send you a call later and, thank you for, doing that.
Yeah, no, it's a tool I'm used to having, I just don't have it here, so I'm gonna change it.
Happy to help.
Yeah, thank you. Likewise.
Yeah, she is the most hardworking person I have come across. Thank you. Well, hope you guys, do well in executive session. Merry Christmas. All right. Merry Christmas. Take care, man. Thank you very much. Yeah. Till the next time.
I'll just follow you around. Okay, all right, well, that makes me feel better. be the.
to good friends about Florida State.
That's right. We always have plenty to talk about.
That's right.
Or cry about.
They're playing better now, though.
What's that?
They are playing better.
I'd like to call this meeting, the Lancaster County Council back to order, to have a motion to come out of executive session. I have a motion from Mr. Blackman, a second from Mr. Mosteller. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval.
In executive session, a pending contractual matter and a pending threatened litigation matter were discussed. As to those items, there were no votes taken or decisions made. Additionally, administrator's evaluation occurred.
All right?
I'd like,
Anything else?
I note for the record that there is a matter of Hector Road closure that was discussed, and I believe the administrator is looking for some guidance and a motion out of executive session with regard to the potential closure of Hector Road by CSX Railroad, and whether the county consents to that or not.
I'd like to make a motion not to close the Hector Road Railroad crossing.
Have a motion for Mr. Graham, not to close Hector Road, and a second from Mr. Griff. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. At this time, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
I'm gonna call Mr. Honeycutt. He asked me to dial him up and.
I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
Wait, look, his line's busy. Hold on, just be patient.
He's not at this meeting. We
But he
can't
told
use
me
his
in the
motion.
meeting when I get him on the phone.
He can do electronic.
Yeah.
It's 9:43 and I got some people ready to go
I'll tell
home.
Larry Honeycutt on you, buddy.
Motion to adjourn.
I have a motion for Mr. Carnes to adjourn. Thank you, Mr. Carnes. Second from Mr. Mosteller. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. Thank y'all. Good night.
I was counting on you